Clutching her grosgrain purse, she resumed her position, sitting primly, ankles crossed, hands placed one on top of the other in her lap. The ride grew smoother, and she chanced to look at the other 3 passengers who had boarded the coach with them at Burnt Station. One was an old man with a placid, grandfatherly face. She thought he might have been a preacher when he reached inside his breast pocket and pulled out a book of scripture. But then she noticed that the inside of the book was carved out to hold a small metal flask, which he eagerly swilled from, and she wasn't so sure anymore. The young man next to him, a kid really, looked anxiously out the window, as if he was ashamed of riding in the coach instead of doing the manly thing by pulling his weight alongside on a cow pony. His traveling companion might have been his father, a grizzled character with a faded indigo vest and a large wiry gray beard that would have benefited from a pair of shears. No one chatted. The preacher drank. The man in the blue vest dozed. The salesman stared at his little bureau as if thinking of his next account. Another jolt of the coach sent her once again into the vicious corner of the bureau. This time, she sat back, rubbing her ribs. "Name's Mr. Henry Glassy, ma'am." She looked up to find the salesman smiling at her again. He was a very pleasant-looking man, one whom she could believe provided good companionship on a long, dusty ride across a prairie such as this. But she didn't want companionship. She preferred silence. She could hide in silence, at least from everyone except herself. She stared at the man through the anonymity of her veil. Bitterly, she wondered if the kindness would flee from his eyes if she told him who she was, that her face was on wanted posters from Maine to Missouri, that the gloves she wore to hide her lack of a wedding ring also hid the scar on her palm that was sketched onto every one of those posters. She'd seen the last poster in Chicago. That had been 3 years back, and Wyoming Territory seemed far enough west to be safe. But every day, she worried that it might not be. She'd been held captive in a nightmare in New York. Now she was running from that nightmare, and from her own face, and from one violent man who would see her dead before she could utter the truth about a crime she didn't commit.